I am actually in the history department here at UCI.
Oh,
And
who are you?
what?
Introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry. My name is Patricia Seed. I go by Pat, and I'm in the history department here at UCI.
You need to move over to be in the camera space.
Oh,
Sorry.
don't like being on camera. Is the camera space here?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And I have sort of two interests in gaming, one of which is teaching historical games, in other words, games about history. And I've been doing that since 1999 when I was at Rice University, and we had a huge classroom with 55 seats and displays, round corner displays, so that everybody could see what everybody else was doing. Here in the humanities, we have, I think, a 31-seat place that can't even run Civilization 4. So that says a little bit about some of the priorities in the humanities in terms of computing. The other thing that I've been doing is looking at rebuilding with Magda a 3D model whose interactive component has not been created yet, but involves the let's see if I can get it up there. Involves the slave fort at Elmina on the West African coast. Very often in digital humanities, the projects are all about Greek and Roman civilization, and maybe there's something about the Tang Dynasty or the Three Kingdoms or something like that. In other words, they're very predictable historical topics, sort of classical, what everybody knows about. But if you want to talk about something that's controversial, like the slave trade in West Africa, that's the kind of thing that people in the humanities tend to shy away from. So that's one of the things that that we do. So at any rate, what I'm going to do is run through this is actually a download of the course that I teach. And there are a couple of things, there are two things that are kind of important issues in history that have been for about the last 2 years. One of which is material culture, which you can see obviously from the recreation of the slave fort. And the other thing is contingency. And while contingency is talked about by people in history a great deal, very little of them do any profound thinking about it. Now, contingency means that history is actually a series of accidents, that things have happened not necessarily for a reason, but by chance. And so the question is to get students to think about history as a succession of chances. And one of the ways in which I used to introduce them to that was a card game called Chrononauts, which if any of you are not familiar with, my students hate it. But it's a very good introduction to counterfactual history. Counterfactual history actually works only best with military history. As you probably know, there are all kinds of books out on alternative history in military history, when battles go one way or another because you have very clear on and off decisions. But when you have more complex decisions about characters, what happens if Goebbels dies or is assassinated? What then happens to Nazi propaganda? How then does it develop? And I've had students produce quite a number of interesting games. One of the more interesting ones that the students produced here was a version, it was based upon Go, and it was mutually assured destruction between the United States and Russia using Go. And that actually was I thought that was one of the more creative and innovative projects. I allow students to do board games, computer games, card games, anything that they happen to be interested in. And I do a little bit of sort of history of games. Here are some of the things that show up on the syllabus. The syllabus is all online: a history of playing cards, backgammon, a whole variety of other games. So it's not just yeah, and this is they actually at the end of the quarter, everybody has to produce a playable game. And they succeed. You either do that or you flunk the course. So there's a big incentive for them to do that. And they can do that in any media. So I have this as kind of the structure of how I do it. And one of the things that, in ways in which I teach them about history and games is to have them play when I have access to a computer, or somebody has a computer that they can throw up. Other people do console games and things like that. Very good console game on Joan of Arc, and what were her possibilities of having escaped being killed, what kinds of strategies might she have employed. And that was done using Unreal on a console. Then the other thing that I have them do is critique historical games like Civilization. In other words, Civilization is a game that has a set narrative. And that's the problem with most of the games that historians produce. That is to say that they want to tell their version of the story. They want to give history their interpretation. And I look at them and I say, well, you know, my view of the Crusades is different. I'm not interested in playing your game. You know, I want people to be able to explore alternatives to what is your own particular interpretation of history. So that's part one, and that's actually the game that I've taught. That's the course that I've taught for the longest period of time. I started teaching it at Rice in 1999. And when I came here, one of the first things I asked in my interview is I said, I teach games in history. Are you okay with that? And when they said yes, I said, okay, all right, I'm interested in this job. So the other thing that I've been doing, and I'm trying to find it's very awkward because my screen is totally blank here. And that's the only way we could get it up. See, where's computer?
Here.
There?
Yep.
Okay. And is that the Lexar drive?
That's
What?
the hard drive. That's the hard drive.
That's the hard drive.
It's the one just.
Ah, lovely. So it's not recognizing my. Okay. All right. Well, I'll have to go back because I wanted to show you.
Just plug it in again.
Plug it in again. Try it again. Oh, the light goes on. Okay. So the other two things, material culture. Yeah, I'm also a little bit of a map geek, by the way. The last book I did is the Oxford Map Companion, 100 Sources in World History, and just a little bit of selling here. It involves every map has a diagram with it to show you what the content of the map is. And then also I created GIS maps that will actually show you where it is, plus QR codes in the bottom left-hand corner that you can use a cell phone with. It'll take you to a website that has Google Maps showing you the places and things that are designed in Google. So it's a kind of an attempt to do a hybrid between visual objects, which are copyrighted, and being able to portray the places on the web so that people can actually go back and forth and students can actually get a sense of relational space, which is one of the things that cartography is all about. Is it Ganamina? At any rate,
We could go further
Game
down.
Teach, I think. It's down 2.
One more.
One more?
That's it.
That's
Yes.
it?
I feel like we have a collaborative game in the making here.
Yeah, right.
3D
Exactly.
modeling of heritage sites. Is that
Yeah,
what-
3D modeling of heritage sites, right? Thank you very much. What this shows, and I'm actually doing, this is actually a topic, it's the material culture in the historical world. In archaeology, it's called computer-assisted archaeology. And in fact, what we have is the slave fort at Elmina from 1482 when it was first built, all the way up to the present day. During most of that period, it was, and this is just a,
He wants to control click.
and it's control click, okay? And this is a very early version. I don't have a later version. This is actually done in Unity and is 3D, Oculus 3D Rift. So you can actually go through the slave fort and actually, sort of wherever you want to go and actually see what the interior of the fort is like. Now this is the English version of it, which is the latest, its latest iteration.
This is a very early version of it.
Yes, this is a very early version of it. It was actually played at the game thing last night, where it had a whole bunch of people looking at it. So, and this is the other part of it. This is the, if you want to say, this is the cultural education part of it. In other words, one of the things that people tend not to study, for example, is our African cultures. I mean, who can tell us the difference between a Fante and an Akan in terms of what they look like, what their behavior's like, what their community is like, and which ones of them?
It doesn't like it.
No, it does not like that one.
I think we need, for interest of time.
Yeah, okay, all right. At any rate, what this is this shows some of the folklore of the of an Akan community that is situated right next to the fort. Akans are not enslaved. They're people that actually help the Portuguese, Dutch, and English enslave other people, but they have some very interesting rituals, and there's a very famous folklore story which is called the Spider Trickster story. And we have a version of the Spider Trickster. We also have all the information on kind of rituals that are done at crossroads and things like that. So it's a combination of the historical culture as well as the actual archaeological reconstruction of a slave fort. So that's where we are right now. Thank you.
Questions for Pat? Go
I
ahead.
have a question for everybody.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the fact that you're getting a lot of games out of your students.
Yes.
So I think you're getting to see a lot of creativity and
Yep.
a lot of their interests.
Mhm.
I'm seeing a new kind of art game that basically takes the premise that your games are not going to be a repeatable kind
Right,
of thing.
absolutely.
So,
Not
and
allowed.
I'm thinking particularly about like games like Train. Do you know Train?
No.
Train was an art game that came out I think a year ago, and
Oh, okay.
it was introduced. It was a game with cards, and you had wooden things with meeples on it, and you tried to move your train and get the most number of people to particular locations.
Yeah.
And then halfway through the game, you started drawing cards and of the places you were going to take these people.
Yeah.
And it had words like Dachau and Auschwitz.
Right.
And things
Oh,
like
that's
this.
from
Brenda-
from UCSC.
Brenda-
Is it
Brenda,
really?
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely fascinated with this. This was a designer that basically said, okay, well, if they're going to play my game once, I may as well just do it like a movie and,
Yeah.
and hit them over the head with the end of the mystery first.
Right.
And I'm just interested in knowing, because you see a lot of student games,
Oh, yeah.
whether you see
Tons of
this kind of, use of the game medium
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
to do for a particular purpose. like
Yeah,
that.
no, actually, the game that I was thinking of that a student designed here actually about 5 years ago was the 405.
Okay.
And that was a very popular game, and sort of trying to get to certain places, and what happens if all of a sudden there's a slow up. And there were actually physical, like cars and stuff, and there were cards that you drew in order to get down, go either direction on the 405, which is, as we all know, everybody's favorite freeway around here. So yeah, no, I mean,
That's
I've seen, yeah, no, I've seen where I've had games like that. I've had historical overseas exploration games. I don't allow them. There are a couple of things I don't allow them. I don't allow them to copy certain games, like you can't do a replay of Monopoly, you can't do.
Settlers of Catan.
Yes.
Yes.
I've been at Settlers of Catan have been behind me ever since I was at Rice in 1990. I mean, I was
Yeah.
Rice long before then, but 1999. People, can I do Settlers of? So there are all kinds of, Risk, things like that they are not allowed to copy. They have to come up with something different. I mean, the mod of Go to make it mutually assured destruction. Yeah, that was different. I've also had some backgammon. This fall I had a backgammon game that was about the conflict, the war between Persia and the Greeks. And of course, it was done by Persian students, so the Persians wound up having an advantage in terms of winning. So they're all different varieties. The one thing that I don't let them do is do C++, program in C++. They can use Python, but not C++, because the reason I found is that most kids spend all their time debugging the C++ program, and as a result, they don't focus on the game or the history or anything like that. So they wind up with something that's, yes, that mechanically works, but is not interesting or not giving us any more insights into the past.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. What?
It's up there.
Oh, yeah, that's the, it's finally up there. This is actually the interior of Ghana, away from the coast. And, yeah. At any rate, I have to go because I have to teach.
Okay.
So-
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a couple